Good evening. Good evening. How's everyone doing? Welcome. It's Wednesday. It's 7:04. We're 4 minutes behind this important schedule. We're on Shoptalk, the only show dedicated to landlording in Alberta. And tonight, I'm finally joined back by the long lost Chris Noble. Chris, glad you made it back to the show.
Oh, thanks, Mac. You know what? I told you I was going to be late, but I almost caused myself to be a little bit later tonight. So, unfortunately, or fortunately, I was on my way up to Edmonton, and while I was on my way up, there was a driver, like literally shoulder to shoulder. So we ended up calling them in, and they were an impaired driver, and we got involved with that. But I still made the show.
I love it. Love it. Doing your citizen's duty. So, well, good. Glad to have you back on the show, Chris. You were missed last week with your technical issues, but I'm pretty excited about the conversation tonight. We got a pretty cool guest lined up. We're going to talk some numbers. We're going to talk some mortgages. We're going to talk about the importance of having the right person on your team if you're a landlord looking to expand that portfolio. So tonight's a little more investment focused. We're going to try a few different topics, see what people like. So if you're watching right now, tune in, say hi, let us know where you're watching from. We always like to know where people are tuning in from. And let us know what you think of the topic tonight. If it's more what you guys want, or do we go back more to landlording specific topics, let us know. Let us know what's working for you. So
Absolutely.
One thing I also want to do, Chris. Okay, sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to echo what you're saying there, because we want to make the content of our show here for you guys what it is you guys want to know about. So if you want to send private messages to Mac and I throughout the week, or while we're trying to gear up our next show, please do. This is your show. We certainly host it, but it's your show, and it's your business that we're trying to help you make better and run better. So this is where we're headed tonight with a really cool guest.
We've got community in the name. We're driven by our members, and this community serves its members. So by all means, this show follows that same direction. So we definitely want to know what you guys are thinking. And I do get comments all the time. What I'm going to probably do is I'm going to create a Google form. Part of my problem is I haven't tracked this very well. I've got comments on Messenger, on email, on text, and on phone calls of all things, trying to put some of these tips together you guys have suggested for future show topics. But maybe I'll get a link or a form or something going. And also there's Facebook posts too, which again are in its own challenge of trying to track. But let us know. That's what makes the show great. And one thing too I wanted to comment, I meant to mention this last show before we kick it off here, is Chris, you were pretty impressed with our thumbnail, our marketing art for the show piece, hey? You thought that last one came out pretty good.
Oh yeah, no, where are you going with this, Mac?
I just wanted to say we've got a really great gal. I got a full-time employee that she works remotely for us. Her name is Magdalena, and I just want to give her some props and say thank you, Magdalena. You're doing a great job, because she creates all of our marketing material and does a bunch of other things in the background and to help us run a little bit smoother. And she does a great job. And I tell you what, the art that we've got for our thumbnails and kind of all that good stuff is levels of beyond both my ability and Chris's tech prowess. So she does a great job, and it makes the community that much better. So thanks, Magdalena, for all your hard work. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, she's making us look good, and this is what we're trying to do. You know, we're just a couple of guys got some office space in our homes, and we're trying to bring you a product and make connections for you. And every day is a building day for us with this gig. So.
Absolutely. So we got a couple of people tuning in. Hi. I don't have my visibility on the Facebook side, so we've got someone on Facebook. Hi from Ponoka. Is that you, Chris, from your cell phone?
No. No, it's not. It's Lonnie. It's Lonnie from Ponoka. Him and I have chatted.
Cool.
Co-landlord or peer in Ponoka. So love it. Him and I've chatted about some issues there. So I love when our Ponoka guys click in here. So.
Absolutely. And we got Christine. Christine, thanks for coming back again with us. She's coming in from Langley, BC, and she's got her rentals in Lethbridge. So very cool. All right. Well, let's give a little bit of a warm up to our special guest tonight. So his name is Shaune Impey. Full disclosure, he is now my mortgage broker. He did my most recent renewal/refinance. Came highly recommended to me by a few of my peers in the investment community. And man, what a golden recommendation that was. So Shaune is great. He's great with numbers. He's an investment focused mortgage broker, and he's going to really shed some light tonight on, I'm going to call it a chess match. It really is a game of chess on how you stack and organize the mortgages to get them to qualify as much as you can possibly qualify for. So we'll have that conversation. Oh, we got Lewis as well, and we got Robinson Smith tuning in. And actually, sneak peek, folks, this gentleman here, Robinson, is going to be our guest next week. And I'll get Shaune to preview a bit of that. They've got a really cool strategy around mitigating taxes by doing something called the Smith maneuver. So maybe we'll pick Shaune's brain on that tonight, as Shaune is Smith maneuver qualified as a mortgage broker, which there are few and far between of those types of mortgage brokers. So really good skill set to have if you're looking to expand again the portfolio. So let's get to it. And we've got one last call in here from Camrose in Wetaskiwin, another Facebook user. Chris, can you give the Facebook user a name?
Yeah, it's Tony from Wetaskiwin Camrose. So that's great.
Very cool.
Hey, Mac, while we're chatting here,
Sure.
you know, we asked people to send us messages. Can we not send a message directly to, you're going to have to help with the tech part of this. Don't we have a communication ability with Alberta Landlord community? Isn't there a messenger portion?
Yeah, we can actually, you bet. That's the kind of the nice thing about that community folks we got on the side. So we got a bunch of new people this week too. So let's do a quick run on that, and then we'll get Shaune in here because he's eager now, and it's 11 after. We've got Alberta Landlord community. It's a private Facebook community, private network, if you want to call it. We have the ability to connect on there. There's an event calendar. We've got topics, meaning that you can have conversations in different areas and keep it organized. If you want to talk about paperwork and leases, if you want to talk about marketing, talk about evictions and so on, all those conversations are organized nicely over on albertalandlordcommunity.ca. So go check it out. And the best way to get, of course, folks to follow us is on YouTube for all of our live content, plus our exclusive content, which is only available on our private network, which again is Alberta Landlord Community. Okay. Less marketing. Let's get to the meat and bones of this great show. Let's bring Shaune Impey on. Shaune, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing good, thanks, Mac and Chris.
Hi, Shaune.
So for the glowing introduction.
Oh, I try. So let's round it out and do a little bit better. So for the folks that don't know who you are, Shaune, give us your 30-second pitch of what you do and who you are.
I am an investor, and I'm an investor-focused mortgage broker. So I have quite a few doors, and if there's been any mistakes made by investors or problems with mortgages, I've probably experienced it personally. So I know the pain of trying to get mortgages when you have a lot of doors and some of the issues that come into play.
Okay. So let's take an easy question off the hop here to get the conversation going. What would be the difference between an investor-focused mortgage broker versus any mortgage broker off the street that's shopping for perhaps the best rate? What would be my advantage if I, as a landlord, want to get more properties, that I should be having an investment-focused mortgage broker?
Well, there's a lot more to your mortgage than the best rate. Obviously, it's what's going to work for you in the future. So different lenders have different numbers of mortgages that you can have. So the key is to work through them from the fewest allowable and the fewest with that lender up to quite a few with a lender. So use an example. There's lenders out there that'll do 5 or 6 rental mortgages. So if you went and got your 5 or 6 mortgages with them first, and then you kind of run out of any other lenders to use. So the secret is to go to maybe the one-offs right off the bat, depending on what kind of mortgage you want, and then you can build a few of them, and then you go to a lender that might allow a large number of mortgages, but maybe only 3 or 4 with them. So you really have to plan out your strategy so you don't handcuff yourself a little bit. If you get too many properties, then you might end up being in a B realm, or if you don't go to the right lender with the right offsets and what they going to use for rental income, you may just go to qualification room too.
Okay. So let me just kind of sum it up in a way. Hopefully this makes sense. So the strategy and where your value comes to the table for someone expanding their portfolio is you'll look at all the different lending requirements, which lenders have pages of that. So there's lots of variables to look at, and you'll go basically with the most restrictive lenders first to maximize their number of mortgages you can get with them. And every lender has a limit of how many mortgages they'll give out, which you call that, is that called a global limit?
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Yeah.
Right. I've heard it used before. So correct me if I'm wrong here, Shaune. I don't want to lead us astray. But you'll look at all these different lenders. You're going to go find the most restrictive folks to get the mortgages from first. And then once you max them out and they say, no, thank you, no more, you go to more of we'll call them more liberal lending lenders, maybe some credit unions and so on and so forth, where they look at their criteria a little bit differently, where you can still continue to get mortgages. Because if you don't get the mortgages in the right order, what will happen if someone wants to say go for 10 properties, but they didn't pick the mortgages in the right order? Do they hit a lending wall perhaps?
They can, yeah. So there's lenders that will do about a dozen mortgages, but they'll only do 5 with themselves. So if you went to this lender first and got all 5 mortgages, rental mortgages with them, you couldn't go back there and get the 6th mortgage with them. And if no other lenders will do more than 5, you're kind of hooped, right? So
right.
you might want to put you into somebody that does 5 mortgages, and you get those out of the way. They're in your portfolio. So now you go to the lender that allows 10 mortgages, but only 5 that particular lender. You got those 5 that don't really hurt your numbers, so you can end up getting the full 10 mortgages.
Gotcha. Chris, you following that? I see you frowning there. Are you thinking about something?
Well, I'm trying to process this just because I got a little lost here. Let's use my scenario. I deal with the ATB, and they only let me have 4 doors.
Yeah.
After that, they consider me commercial.
Yeah.
So as soon as you move to the commercial category, then your rates are higher. You have to pay fees for them to process it and everything else. So if I've maxed out at ATB, can I jump across the street to whoever, CIBC, Service Credit Union, can you start over with them?
Yeah, you can go to a different lender. So let's say ATB lender A only they cap you at 4. So we'll go to lender B that says you can have 10 mortgages, but we'll only fund 5 of them. So you've got
because
your 4
you've
with ATBs. Yeah, so those just sit on the sideline. So you still got room for 5 more mortgages with this B lender. We might want to hit somebody else and get that 5th one with somebody else. Then we'll go to them and start working on 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Okay, so they include, what you're saying then is they include your numbers already that you have with other people, so that they won't give you another brand new 10 SWAT or 10 more chances. Yeah.
No, yeah. Those are included. So they generally have 2 numbers. One is the total number of mortgages they'll let you have, say 4, and they may have a restriction that says you can have 4 rental properties, but we'll only finance 2 of them. So if you go to them first and get 2 financed with them, you're done. So
right,
you can't.
You want to put up.
If you go to the one-offs of, lender C will say, well, we'll do 1 rental for you, and the lender D says we'll do 1 rental for you. So you get 1 with each of them. Then now you got your 2. You go to your other lender and say, oh, well, I've got these 2, but none with you, so you should be able to give me a couple mortgages.
Okay.
So now you got with 4 mortgages, and now you go back to our favorite lender that does 10, and those don't count against your number.
Right. Hey, I just want to interrupt for a sec. Mac, I'm watching our show on the side so I can see who's doing it. Is there any way to turn off the transcription? Because it's going right over top of Shaune on my... do you know how to do that?
You're on your iPad?
No, I'm on my iPad talking to us, but I also have my iPhone going on the side, and I see that it transcribes what we say, and the transcription is going right across Shaune's face. So I imagine other people are having to deal with that too.
I think that's an iPhone feature that like Siri's picking up conversations. I don't know. I don't know if we can tackle that right now. It might be a bit of a challenge, but maybe just as we talk, try playing with your iPhone and flip through some settings. But it's only on your iPhone you're seeing the transcribing happening.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Then it helps having a tech, Shaune?
I'm not very literate when it comes to this kind of stuff.
So Lonnie Orser puts up a question that says, "Is it better to stay with a bank or go with a private lender?" What are your thoughts on that, Shaune?
Well, I'm not sure what he means by a private lender, because private implies, higher fees and, higher interest rates. So, you want to get the best mortgage. You can qualify for a bank mortgage on the A side, which is the big name lenders, the big five banks, or what we call the monoline lenders like MCAP or RMG or RFA. So just back up. There's about 30 to 35 banks in Canada. So we only ever see the big five: TD, Scotia, BMO, CIBC, RBC, National Bank, maybe if you're out east. So the brick and mortar ones that people see, but all these other lenders, and I'm sure some people on the show have got a mortgage from someone like MCAP. They're a bank, Schedule I bank, just like TD or anybody else, but all they do is mortgages.
Right.
So they're a real bank, and not to be scared of taking your mortgage out with them. They're giving you the money. You're not giving them the money. So
right.
I like people say, why I don't want to go with someone who's not a bank. It makes me nervous. They're giving you the money. It's not your money at risk. So.
Right. So Lonnie, could you just clarify with us what you meant by private lender? You could just throw another comment up, would be great.
Yeah. I can take a stab and add on to that. I think, you look at different sources of money, and typically mortgages are long-term plays, amortization periods of 15, 20, 25 and up for years. Whereas private lenders, they have less lending requirements, but for that benefit of the less restrictions, they're going to charge you a higher fee. And typically those are short-term plays where that money is meant for a fix or flip, or for creative financing deals or bridge payments or something, where those monies might be only lent out for a number of months, up to maybe 1 or 2 years max. So I'm guessing that's kind of the context I'm trying to put to that question, but definitely Lonnie, you can dig in a little bit more and let us know. Hey Bill, we got you tuning in from Lethbridge. Welcome. And Christine was just adding into she's on the iPhone, she doesn't see the transcribing. So Chris, it must be something we flip on your phone there for your IT issues being troubleshooting the fly here. But okay, so let's kind of target an easy scenario for folks. I think probably one way, if they're going to come to you, Shaune, and they're going to say, yeah, I want to build a portfolio, probably one of the questions you're going to come back to them is, well, how many properties do you want? Like, what's your end game? Do you usually push that question back to the users or to your new clients?
Yeah, that's a question I often ask right up the front, especially when people start talking to me in a little sidebar here about putting in the hold co and incorporating and doing a bunch of things. And my question is, well, how many properties do you own? And well, I don't have any yet. I don't have, so, if you're going to get a lot of properties, your accountant is the first person to talk to, and talk to your broker about the best way to structure that. And there's ways to, do it in your personal name and do your taxes and your accounting in your company name as well. So,
right.
So I do ask. Yeah.
So why is that important then? So like if I only want 5 properties, if I only want 10 or 15, why do you need to know that number, Shaune?
Just for the structuring of where we start. And someone says, hey, I only want 3 properties. Okay, well, we won't. It may be better for you to go with one lender that allows 4 or 5 properties, and maybe they're the best fit for you, and we can do that. So,
okay.
There's no guarantee that you're going to get the very best rates when we structure the mortgages. So, and like I said, rate is always about the third or fourth thing in the equation of doing your mortgage, because there's more important things about penalties. What you can pay down, and everybody's situation might be a little bit different. So I need to find out what your requirements are and ask some questions, and then we fit the mortgage to what works for you, and we shop around to a lender that can meet those requirements at the lowest rate based on that. So
Yeah.
when you shop for a car, right, you have requirements and stuff like that. You don't just go in there and ask the guy to give you the cheapest car on the lot.
Is a great analogy. Absolutely. I mean, when you helped me out, you got me a re-advanceable mortgage, where basically I got a mortgage with the HELOC, which is setting me up to do the Smith maneuver. So
Yeah, correct.
there we go. Okay, so what are some common? So if I want to come to you and I want to start investing and I want to get some mortgages going, what things do you need from me up front? Like what things could, if we have people on the show watching, if they want to start qualifying for more, they need to get organized for you so you can properly take a look at their lending abilities.
Yeah. So first thing we look at is, income. So what do you do for a job? Do you have a steady job? Banks love anybody whose salary with a Fortune 500 company, and you've been there for a couple of years, can prove you got a steady income. That's the first thing. Second thing is, do you have a down payment available? If you don't, do you have access? Is it something you can borrow from a HELOC on your personal residence or something like that? So most lenders will allow HELOC to qualify for down payment funds. Of course, then you have to debt service it too, because it's more borrowed money, right? So
That's right.
start with income and down payment, and we can go from there.
Okay. And like, so like, say for example, say maybe Chris and I were looking at buying some more properties. We're going to go do a joint venture. What are things, and we're both existing landlords, so we each have our own existing portfolio. What are things we could do with our existing portfolio to make it look great on paper? Is there certain ways we can, is there certain ratios that you look at to qualify existing properties? What counts, what doesn't count? What should we be doing to set up the right paperwork for the best qualifications with our existing?
So your mortgage payment, your principal interest payment on your rental property is a liability. So I always encourage my clients to go for 30-year AMs, monthly payments, no biweekly accelerated 25-year payments, because that can mean the difference between, a $1,700 or $1,800 payment a month, effective payment versus maybe $1,400 or $1,500.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're $300 cheaper on your payment just by taking a longer AM and not accelerating, that's $50,000 worth of qualification that you can't get because you got that extra $300 liability. So it may mean the difference between being able to buy that next property or not. So
I love that. That's so critical, and I think you bring up a good point there. What qualifies well are cash flow in properties. Cash flow is king, and that's no different in this game when you get the properties looked at. So all you're saying, Shaune, is structure your rental properties to have the lowest amount of overhead and to basically make that difference in cash flow the greatest as possible.
Yeah, lenders look at rental income differently. So some have a really good offset, we call it, which means you're allowed to use the rent against your liability. Scotia's pretty good. They just take half your rent and subtract your principal interest payment. So if your rent is at least double your payment, it's a zero liability for you as far as qualifying. You can have 2 or 3 or 4 of those properties, and it doesn't affect you qualifying for the next one you want to buy because it's a wash. So other lenders use what they call an add back, and they just add half your rent to your income. So by the time you figure out you're only allowed to have 44% of it, or you take half the rent, take 44% of that again, you're down to 20%, and you still got to debt service your mortgage and your property taxes and your heat. So huge difference, to being able to buy that property or not even be in the ballpark. So
yeah, those are good points. I mean, again, it goes by to why, if you're investment focused as a mortgage broker, and I'm choosing to work with you, Shaune, you're looking at all these different factors. And if I've got a goal of getting to 10 properties, you're going to be very diligent and strategic on who you're going to pick to ensure you can maximize all these different areas to get me to 10 mortgages. Where if you simply by not picking that right order and picking the wrong lenders, I could cap myself and hit a lending wall with all the lenders at 5 mortgages and really shut the door to getting more mortgages, which is sad if not done right.
Yeah, and typically people run, you need 20% down to buy a rental property. So if you're buying in that $400,000 range, say for a suited property, which is about what they go for in Edmonton, so you need $80,000. So more often than not, people tap out on their funds for the down payment before they run out of the number of properties. So that's when you go hitting up, cash partners or something like that.
Yeah,
so,
and that's a whole other conversation on raising capital and joint venture partners. So.
Yeah, and there's just on that subject, there's a kind of a fine line there, because lenders always want to know who's involved. So if you've got a partner in there and he's not going to put his name on the mortgage and stuff like that, or you're not going to put your name on it, and you're actively involved and have a share of that, a beneficial interest, the banks want to know that. So I always tell my clients, if you've got somebody who wants to go buy a rental property, just point me in their direction. We'll go get them a mortgage on stuff on your rental property, and what you do after he buys that property is kind of your own business. So
no, so that's a key takeaway. Go ahead, Chris.
Where do you look for properties to buy, Shaune, or where do you find your clients buying? Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I just hear what you say, about a $400,000 property, and that's a suited property.
That's about the going rate for a 1050, 1100 square foot bungalow in Edmonton.
Is that suited?
Probably a little high. I mean, it depends what area of town it is and how nice it is, but 400 probably on the low end, and 450, 475 on the high end.
You may find this interesting then, is people get focused in the big centers a lot of times, but here we can pick up a very nice fourplex with a garage, a two-car garage, and that's split. You pick that up for $345,000. And so this is Ponoka. So people get focused on the larger centers, and sometimes if you start looking just outside just a little bit, there is a market out there as well. And Mac and I have been chatting a little bit because there's another landlord that we both know that he's really switched on, and he's taken it from the single family or single unit dwellings, and he's going into multiple units, and the return on investment is amazing once you start doing that.
Yeah, his name doesn't rhyme with Gord, does it?
Nor that I know.
Small world.
Yeah.
So,
but
I've got some clients in Ponoka. They just bought a side-by-side duplex with suites, and I think they paid $350 range for this thing. It's got 4 doors and 4 rents. So
your clients didn't have
rents are less. Yeah, rents are less in Edmonton and stuff, but it's still that extra.
It's all relative.
Yeah, your clients didn't happen to come out of the northern community, did it?
They're born and bred in Ponoka, as far as I know.
The reason I was going to say, the way you're describing it, we're all chatting in code here, it seems, but there's a couple that contacted me about helping them, just explaining the market, and we have a similar background of employment, and we had a big chat. So it's funny how people who really pay attention, there are some amazing deals out there, and both have found fourplexes literally a block from me. So it's if I'm not sure where I want to go. I got to talk. Mac and I are going to talk a little bit more whether we're going to expand ourselves now. But having partners is a good thing if your partners both participate. So
yeah. So just gotta be careful. The bank's lawyer is always asking that question about anybody else have an official interest. So.
Yeah,
and they're always looking for someone trying to, money laundering or some of the other things that go on. That they're really diligent on down payments and source of funds for down payment. They don't want anybody to be laundering money through real estate, by buying the properties and turning around, and then that dirty money turns into clean money once you sell a property again. You put it back in your pocket. So
Yeah.
Mac, that's my question you put up there. I was just replying to Lonnie's to get him to ask what he meant. Yeah. So,
Okay, cool. Well, then we'll skip that one.
Yeah.
Christine just writes here, I'm looking forward to find out what the Smith maneuver is. Shaune, give us a high level of what that is, and maybe we're getting a bit of a sneak peek to next week's show here.
I have a one-sentence definition. It's refinancing your property every month.
It's refinancing your property every month. And why does that? Well, why would I want to do that? What's the advantage of doing that?
So when you get a mortgage for let's
Easy
say
numbers.
so it has to be 80% loan to value or less. So if you have a mortgage on your property at 80% loan to value and you set up your mortgage correctly with the right lenders and the right product, every time you make a mortgage payment, you can get that money back in a HELOC. So if you're making a $2,000 a month payment on your home, and $1,200 of that may be principal, normally what happens just sits there. It's like putting your money under your mattress, right? You got no use for, you can't use it, you can't do anything with it. If you get it back in a HELOC, then it's available to do investments or grow the HELOC for a down payment on another property. So now you can use 80% of the value of your house to invest in whatever. And if you HELOC is 3% interest you have to pay on it, and you can go out and do some private lending or invest in something that's going to bring you 8 or 10%, you're making money off the difference, the arbitrage of what you're paying versus what you're borrowing. It's tax deductible interest if you use it for eligible investments. So puts money in your pocket that you wouldn't have normally to do things. Works great on your principal residence. Principal residence, the interest is not tax deductible. So if you pay down your mortgage, get rid of the non-deductible interest that's on your property, roll it into your HELOC, it becomes tax deductible. That's the basis of the Smith maneuver. So for rental properties, on rental properties, your interest is already deductible on your mortgage, so there's no real gain to pay down a mortgage that might be at 2 or 2.25% to slide it into a HELOC that's at 3% or 3.5%. That's why you want to have your payments as low as you can on your rentals, and just whatever minimum amount you can do slides into your HELOC. The good thing is that now you have this HELOC that's added money, so you don't have to have that sustaining fund that a lot of real estate investment groups say. You always have rent or $5,000 in your, for when the furnace blows up or the hot water tank leaks or something. 6 months to a year after you've got your rental property, you built up this HELOC. So if you need to use money to fix something on your property, you got it available, and your accountant will likely tell you that it's tax deductible because you're using it for investment purposes. So anybody who's got 3 or 4 rental properties with $5,000 sitting in a bank account for the rainy days, could free up some cash for them.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. And I think you got a fan there from Christine. Maybe she'll tune in next week, and we'll listen to Rob. And I haven't talked to Rob here yet, but I'm going to maybe segue. Maybe we should bring you back, Shaune, and have you back on because Rob's really the strategy side of it. And then obviously you come in from making it happen by bringing the right product and then the mortgage side there, Shaune. So
yeah,
a good conversation.
Just a quick history of the Smith maneuver. It was started by Robinson's father back in the 80s in Vancouver. So he wanted to know how Canadians could have tax deductible interest on their personal residence, just like you can in the US. So if you're an American and you have a mortgage, you can deduct your interest payments on your home personal property. In Canada, you can't do that. So he developed the Smith maneuver where your money goes into the HELOC. You get rid of your mortgage as quickly as you can, and now you've got all this tax deductible interest when you use that money to invest. So
and I think he even mentioned once too, where even if you're not looking and buying other properties and you're just a I'm gonna call a simple landlord, but maybe more of a smaller landlord, you want to keep it small, is you roll the balance off of the HELOC that you build up to do, what does he call it? You do top up payments on the mortgage, and then now you flip that interest over. I don't know. You know what? I'm not going to try to explain it because I'm sure I've already just butchered it. But
So if you have income from a rental, excess income, you have the option of putting that into a prepayment mortgage on your personal residence.
right.
So now that cash now becomes tax deductible, and you can use it for investment purposes.
Yeah.
So
And the one thing. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, that sounds really good. I want to just ask something else. Is there any advantage to a blanket mortgage when you have 3 or 4 properties?
the A lenders won't do a blanket mortgage for you on the residential side, so you have to get into the commercial side to do that, and they'll look at it. So commercial's a different game. They use what's called a debt coverage ratio, basically, to figure out what your properties are, what kind of return or cost of the mortgages are. So they set a ratio, usually it's around 1.2 of. So you need to bring in enough cash so that when you pay off, when you divide that by your mortgage, it works out to 1.2. So if you have a $1,200 of income and $1,000 mortgage, you'd have a 1.2 debt coverage ratio. So, and that's what they look focused. It's more like just like when you buy a multifamily or other properties, the building is what they use to figure out whether you can qualify, not so much your personal income. So.
Right. So I've heard people, so correct me if I'm wrong, Shaune, but I've heard people in the past describe it where, they've accumulated a large number of mortgages on let's call them single family or duplexes or smaller properties. And they've got to a tipping point where they're at 6, 8, 9, or 10, whatever this magic number is. And then they fold it into a commercial product, assuming that their DCR, their debt coverage ratio, and their cash flowing is strong enough to qualify. And they've gone down that route. And they've essentially wiped their personal lending, like their personal debt gone, and then they can start the whole process over of requalifying for mortgages. Is that a strategy that people do?
Yeah, I have a client. I did a private mortgage for him on a 9-plex there that he's like that. He has a number of joint venture partners, and I'm trying to remember how many doors. It's well over 100 now, and he's with one lender that basically looks at his debt coverage ratio. And the downside of that is it takes a long time for the wheels to move on the commercial side. So you can't have a 1-week condition period to see if you can qualify for the mortgage. So so some of my clients who are in that boat have built up enough cash that they have a HELOC basically that they can go out and write a check for the property when they buy it, and then they refinance it and take their HELOC and on to the next one. Right. So
I see. And they just use that HELOC as a kind of a bridge between finance, and they get the property acquired, and then they roll it back into the portfolio when they get the approval for it.
Correct. Yeah.
So my thought process, Chris, I thought about this a lot. I want to continue expanding my portfolio, but what I struggle with going down that commercial side, at least right now, but I'm not quite big enough to be there. But my thought process is on the exit side. So Shaune, how easy is it to exit? Let's say I've hit my target, right? I've got my 20 properties, they're rolled into a commercial mortgage. And at some point in the future, the market has a bit of an uptick. I can maybe sell a few for some profit, or maybe something changes in my direction. I want to offload some properties. How do you do that if you're under a blanketed mortgage?
Well, you can sell them and they just reduce the overall debt. So it's not hard to, you can sell 1 or 2 or get rid of them as you go. So, okay. And how you dispose of them is your accountant question, not your mortgage broker question. So, and taxes and, do you sell them on a VTB and spread your taxes over time or things like that? So, I know just enough about that to be dangerous, but I don't give accounting advice or legal advice. So without a pretty good qualifier in front of it that says it's just my experience.
Yeah, no, and that's totally fair then. Okay. Awesome. Do we have any Folks, if you've got questions here, let's kind of pick Shaune's brain when we got him. Maybe we'll wait for some more questions to come in. Shaune, I'm going to ask you that crystal ball question. So what's going on right now in the environment? Where do you see mortgage rates going right now? Is there some changes on lending requirements that are new that we should be aware of?
Well, mortgage rates are at all-time lows here over late 2020. In 2021, they've crept up a little bit on the fixed side. So mortgage, there's two types. Obviously, there's a variable mortgage and there's a fixed rate mortgage, and they both have different drivers. So the variable mortgage and HELOCs and anything that's got a floating rate is driven by Bank of Canada rate, which is at 0.25%. So I don't think it can go any lower. So we're getting the best variable rates right now. Bank of Canada put out their announcement here recently saying that they didn't raise the rate. They have about 8 times a year where they make an announcement on the rate, and they didn't raise it. They said that maybe in 2022 in the fall they might look at raising the rate depending how the economy looks. They clawed that back from 2023 was their prediction before. So can we believe them that variable rates aren't going to go up for another year or year and a half? I don't know. I don't know where the economy's going. I don't know what's going to happen with COVID or anything like that. So they're all-time low. Fixed rates they work off the bond rate. So the bond rate has gone up. So consequently, fixed rates have gone up about half a point in the last 6 or 8 weeks there. It's been that long, maybe. So it used to be back in January, you could get a fixed rate and a variable rate would almost be the same number. You could get fixed rates for, I'm talking about owner-occupied, insured property, which is the cheapest rate of, 1.54, 1.59, and the variables were in that 1.5 range as well. So if you were long-term and thinking, I'm going to be here for 5 years for sure, I would say you'd be better off just take your fixed rate, zero risk over the next 5 years. So
yes, yeah, locked in.
Typically the variable rate is anywhere from 3/4 to maybe 1% less than fixed. So you got room for those bumps to catch, right? It's just how fast are those bumps in the Bank of Canada rate gonna happen? We saw last year in the spring that Bank of Canada rate dropped dramatically. Dropped 1.5 points in a matter of, it seemed like weeks, but it was probably over about 1.5 months or 2 months. So,
right. And when you say 1.5, just so we're on the same page, a point's like a percentage, like a full percentage, and then when you talk basis points, 10 basis points is 1/10 of a percentage.
Yeah, 0.1%. So Bank of Canada rate was 3.95 in the spring of 19, summer of 19. It was in that 3.95 range, and now it's 2.45. So 1%. I got clients who I did mortgages for in early 2019. We're in the 3.5 to 3.75 range, and that was a great rate at the time. So happy to get it. Now that's even higher than B lender rates. So
yeah. That's nuts. So here's a question then. So let's say there's some landlords out there right now are listening to you, Shaune, and they say, well, I've got a rate at 3.5 or 2.9 or something up there. Is it worth having a conversation with you and doing a refinance and paying some fees to save money? Do you have those conversations?
Yeah. So the penalty is a big part of it. So penalties are usually a little more severe at the banks, the brick and mortar banks, the big five, and the monoline lenders. So you have to know how your penalty fee is calculated, and sometimes the savings on interest for getting a lower rate are less than what the penalty is. So maybe it doesn't make sense. So the situation is different. The penalty is always based on how much time is left on the mortgage. So if you've got a year left on the mortgage and you think, geez, maybe in a year the rates are going to really go up. I want to lock in at today's rates for the next 5 years so that when I renew my mortgage that's existing a year from now, I don't want to be paying 3.5% for the next 5 years. I'll lock in now at 2.5%, and I'll be way ahead of the game. So those are the kind of things that people have to consider. So everybody's situation is a little bit different, right? And you do have to, if you refinance, you do have to qualify. So for the new loan.
I definitely understand it. I did go through that exercise earlier this year with you, Shaune.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's cool. Yeah. So I guess my point where I was trying to get there, and just so you guys make sure you caught from what Shaune was saying there, obviously it's personally dependent, but there may be situations out there where refinance and taking a penalty will make a lot of sense on your rentals, because you'll save that delta and difference of an interest rate. You'll get those savings back and be ahead of the game after, X number of months once you've covered the costs. So
and the refinance could be a number of things. It could be, refinance and get a better rate, but also maybe add a HELOC to your rental property so the funds are available to do something with, right? So you're not paying for that HELOC money until you actually need it, right? And if we get you into the right product, there's lenders out there where you can have multiple mortgages under one program. So you could, if you had a $400,000 borrowing limit on a property, for instance, say it's worth 500, 80% is 400. If your existing mortgage is 200, you could, put that into one mortgage and maybe a HELOC. You use your HELOC up and you say, okay, geez, I made a down payment with my HELOC on a property. I don't want to pay HELOC rates of interest on this. I'll lock it into a fixed mortgage or something and pay less interest. And I know what my payments are for the next little while. So one thing about refinancing is the use of funds is always whether it's a tax deductible amount too. So just because you refinanced your rental property, if you went out and bought a boat or something like that, then that interest is not tax deductible. So in the eyes of the CRA and your accountant. So people pull some fast ones sometimes, and some people would not want CRA to knock on their door and do an audit for some of the races with the refinance money. So
we'll highlight the key takeaway, and we'll get into this next week with Robinson Smith. Is you can move this money around, but what you spend on will dictate if you can write off that interest or not. So that's pretty key.
Yeah, that's having the right accountant is a big part of it. So
yeah, absolutely. So Christine just wrote in and asked here, how do you feel about 10-year mortgages right now? I'm assuming she's talking interest, I guess.
10 years. Well, the interest rates on 10 years are higher. In 7 years, 7 years is more expensive than 5, and 10 years is more expensive. So if you're one of those people saying, in my forever home, I just don't want to worry about interest rates going up to 6 or 7%. I'm going to lock in. If that's your comfort level.
Aren't variable rates over the long haul, are they more beneficial?
Well, that's been proven in the past. Now, I guess it depends when you actually took your mortgage out the first time around. If you took it out at a 5% rate and variables were there, then there's lots of movement to go down as well as up, right? So if you got in at 2 or 3 months ago at 1.5 or 1.6% on a fixed rate, and variables the same rate, your fixed is not going to go up. Your variable can't go down. So that would be a question you have to yourself. Is there nothing I want a variable, i.e. the penalty? Variable penalties are 3 months interest generally, and the interest can be, sometimes it's the contract rate, prime minus 1 or something, and some lenders, the penalty is the Bank of Canada rate that you have to pay as an interest penalty. So it's not always exactly what you're paying. It could be, you have to know that when you get into your variables. So
I picked up a mortgage in 2007, my personal mortgage, and I've never seen this again. And prime less 3/4, and the rates kept dropping back then.
Yeah.
So I had quite the rate.
Oh yeah.
Anybody who's on a variable rate, if you shoot with a higher, I always try to go in with variables and go 2-3% higher and figure out what that payment is, and then if the rates drop, great. If they go up, then I'm covered. But you're always paying off that principal a little bit faster if you can settle into a high interest rate payment. So the lower they go, the further ahead you get. So
Yeah, and that's something that anybody who's, trying to guess the rates, they have to do the scenarios and say, what if it went up to this? And, how can I sleep at night?
Mhm.
A lot of people like that fixed rate. They know their mortgage payment is $1,500 for 5 more years.
So that's
Other
why
people are,
that's why I fix it myself. I shoot for a little bit, sort of a, let's say like somebody just put on their 2.5% right now. So I'll shoot for a 4% rate, and I'll set my payment up for that, and then I know that I'm safe. If it ever goes to 4, then I got to start looking at it again. If it ever drops, I know I'm pounding my principal pretty hard. So
yeah. Well, you are. So I guess my question would be, if you wanted to go buy another property and you had a payment set up based on a 4% rate of paying $2,000 a month, when you could have paid maybe $1,500 a month, you might be cheating yourself out of $100,000 worth of mortgage qualification by having a higher payment.
yeah,
So,
I actually
so
should qualify what I said there. That was way back before I was in rentals. That's how I treated
yeah,
my personal private mortgage, and then getting
yeah,
into this rental. Certainly, I'm going to have a chat with you because you bring up some neat strategies here, and
yeah.
I can retool what I'm doing and use some of that money to my advantage. So,
So
if you don't mind, Sean, I am going to give you a call here in the next couple
yeah,
of days.
yeah, no problem. So even on your personal residence, if you set up your payment as an absolute minimum when you start, which would be monthly payments, you can always bump it up later. And if you run into a situation, you can reduce it back to that. You can't go any lower than what you started at.
Yeah, that's a great point. I really wanted to highlight that too, Sean. We've talked about this before on the show, but if you're getting into the being a landlord or a real estate investor as a business, you want to get those monthly costs as low as possible and have that buffer of cash flow as high as possible, because like you said, you can always do top up payments and lump sum payments to kind of keep that same speed of paying down principal if you have the available cash flow to do so. But if times get tough, you're going to want to have a $400 or $500 buffer in your cash flow so you can drop your rents $200 and avoid vacancies and keep your properties full. But if you've nip and tucked yourself really tight in your cash flow and you're at a break even, and the market kind of takes a sag or a dip, well, all of a sudden now you're running negative 100, $200 a month on your cash flow. You can't qualify. You're paying out of pocket to maintain your properties, and you're just not in a very strong position. And it coming back to your commenting about sleeping at night, and
Yeah,
you do that quite well when the cash flow's there.
yeah. So when we send docs into a lender for to qualify to buy a property, they want to see what the mortgage statement says. So if I send in the mortgage statement and it says the payments are $1,500 a month, then that's the debt service, right? Now, if someone who, hey, I want to really pay my mortgage off, I'm going to, add maybe the 20% they allow me to increase my payments, and I'm going to make it biweekly. I might be paying $2,000 a month, and that's what shows up on your mortgage statement, right?
Yeah.
So that's a difference of $500. So that's $100,000 out the window for qualification. So instead of setting it at $2,000, do the $1,500, and then so it's $500 a month. So every 3 months, whenever your bank allows you to make a prepayment, go down there and give them $1,500 or $2,000. You're getting to the same goal at the end because it goes right to your principal. So your mortgage will get paid off just as quickly.
Yeah.
And the lender that's looking at your mortgage statement says, oh, he's only paying $1,500. So we can give him $400,000 instead of $300,000 of a mortgage because his payment's less, right?
Absolutely agree. And one other part I wanted to add to that too, you got me thinking here, Sean. I know we talked about this off air on a few phone calls, is as how you manage your cash flow or your rents on your properties. So if you're in a situation where you're collecting $1,000 a month for rent, and the tenant comes to you and says, I need you to do this repair and I paid it myself, or I do the landscaping or something, you're going to pay your tenant a fee. Typically, I'm not going to call it the lazy route, but the simplistic way of quickly fixing this problem is you discount the rent by whatever that tenant paid out of pocket for that repair, or if they're doing certain chores that you are landscaping, for example, and you're paying them $200 a month to go above and beyond to maintain the property. Well, now you're only charging $800. On paper, your property looks like it's cash flowing less. So what I usually do is I always charge $1,000, and if I owe my tenant money, I do a separate e-transfer or separate transaction. I pay them back in that difference if they've done an odd job, or if there has to be compensation done outside of the rent, I keep the rent as high as possible on paper, and then I do separate transactions to settle any other outstanding business. So then the banks will see my e-transfers or see that payment history. The rents are higher, therefore, going back to what you mentioned about DCR and debt coverage ratio, the properties look the strongest on paper.
Exactly. And that's something even, when people have multifamily properties and they have a live-in caretaker or something like that, and maybe part of the deal is half price rent or maybe even free rent, depending on how big and how much work there is. Well, there's always a check that comes in from the live-in caretaker for his $1,000 or $1,200 rent, and there's a check that goes back to him for costs, right? Because the rent all goes into your net operating income. So if you knock $1,200 off your net operating income, that's a huge difference in the value of your building versus having a $1,200 expense. So very important.
Totally.
Chris, for the people watching there that are the mom and pops or whatever, we often hear this on the page where he says, "Well, I just let my renter do some work and I reduce his rent." What we're telling you is, don't do that. You want to show the cash flow. You want to show that you're receiving full rent, and you want to be able to write off that expense. If you don't realize that, well, if you just reduce your rent by a couple $100, so from $1,000 to $800. You don't get to write off the expense. You just have no income. You want to show a cash flow is what you're both saying, right? So, and that's important to show income and expenses and show that you're operating a viable business. So, you have landlords that give resident managers, you say, well, you can live in the building for free. Well, if they would at least do that swap, you show the banks that you do have 21 units fully rented, not 20 out of 21, right? So
it's pretty common for lenders to ask for 3 months history of rental deposits. They do that for a number of reasons. One is they want to shortcut people who have fake leases and say, I got a renter in there for $1,500. Well, show us the last 3 months of bank deposits to show he's paying $1,500. So you want to do that, but if you've given them $150 a month to cut the grass or something like that, then only $1,350 shows in. Then you only get to use $1,350 towards your qualifications. So there goes some of your what you can qualify for with exactly the same money in your pocket at the end of the day. If you charge them $1,500 and write them a $150 check, they don't come back and deduct that off your rent and say we have to reduce your rental income because you've got a bunch of other expenses.
Yeah. And you know what, just to keep everything streamlined, you do want to keep your renter paying, or your manager or whoever you have in the building, you want to keep them paying what it's supposed to be, and instead of trying to go to the RTDRS and trying to filter all this out in a hearing as to, okay, well, we were doing this, but then there was that, and just keep it simple: income and expenses. And that way, when you have a hearing and you have to boot somebody out, you have a very simple process at the hearing.
Good track record in paper.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Chris.
Anyway, I don't mean to bail on both of you, but I do have something waiting for me here at 8-ish, so I'm not sure where you're at in this chit-chat, but I do have to run on you, Mr. McKenzie.
Well, we are basically at the top of the hour. We can wrap this up. Is there any kind of points here, Shaune? I'll give you back the floor that we haven't really covered that maybe is worth bringing up when we're talking about mortgages and investment-focused brokers.
Well, I always say that it's best to go to your broker and get the opportunity to shop around for 10, 15, 20 lenders depending on your circumstances, instead of walking into your bank who only has one product, and it may not be the right product for you, but that's what they're going to sell you because that's all they got. So getting the from your broker. I mean, I'm always willing to talk to people, and a number of people I've said, hey, I can't do for you what your bank will do for you. Especially on renewal rates these days. I've seen some insane numbers for renewals because they want to retain that client, right? So they're sending out letters, 4 or 5 months in advance saying, we'll renew your mortgage at, I saw one today, 1.59% for 5 years. Well, you can't touch. If we were to switch that into somebody else, we wouldn't get anything less than probably, 195 would be the best. So, there's 4 points difference, but they want to retain that customer. So they're pretty aggressive to do that. And they're tired of all the switching around. Like we talked about, off air before, is that, Bank A, somebody gets hold of their mortgage and says, let's take you over to Bank B, and someone gets hold of a Bank B mortgage and they take it over to C, and C goes to A. So no one's got any more mortgage business. They just paid out a bunch of money to some mortgage brokers and stuff like that. So it's
Okay. Well, there we go.
Well, I'm going to ask one more question. I can let you run, Chris. If you got to go.
Yeah, I do. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. We'll flag you out. I'll wrap up a couple of things. I got one thing I just kind of thought came to me with. I want to run by Shaune, and perfect. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Chris.
Oh, absolutely, guys. Great, Shaune. I'm glad we met. I'm looking forward to chatting with you later on this week, or maybe beginning of next. So, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Who do we have coming on the show in a couple of weeks? I heard they go by the acronym SCAN. Is that anything up your alley there, Chris?
Oh, are we supposed to tell it? We might be getting somebody from the government coming on our show.
We have our first, I'm going to call it an exclusive because I don't think anyone's ever done this before, but we've got a law enforcement unit that, if I've done my research correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, focuses on troubleshooting. They're a law enforcement unit just only on problem properties. That's their whole mandate. Right. And so is that correct?
Yeah, we're pretty good there. And here's the catcher on that. This is a show that you're not going to miss, and we're going to promote it really well, because this is a show you don't want to miss, because you as a landlord, the liabilities, both legal and civil, that can fall on you, and you don't see that big stick coming, and you don't know how to duck. This is a show you'll want to watch, because you can get spanked real bad out of this.
I'm going to be watching with popcorn in my hand as you two talk, and I'm just going to be sitting here taking up real estate and listening to you guys. It'll be a good show. It took us many months to get this guy on the show. We got a sheriff coming on the show. They're with SCAN, Safe for Communities and Neighborhoods. Folks, that's May 19th. So 2 more Wednesdays from now. Stay tuned for it. It'll be a good one.
Right on. Well, pleasure, both of you.
Oh, yeah. He wasn't supposed to go.
He's gone. So that leads me to a little segue there about problem property. So
sure.
People talk about getting pre-qualified or approved or something like that, and that doesn't take into account the property you may be buying. So if the property is always part of the equation when you get an approval for a mortgage. So if you went and made an unconditional offer on this hot property that was a foreclosure and stuff, and then you went to get a mortgage and the bank says, oh, we blacklisted that because it was a drug house 10 years ago, and we don't do remediated properties, and maybe nobody will do a remediated drug house property depending on the circumstances or anything like that. So there's blacklists of properties out there. The banks will never give you that list. They'll only tell you if you make an application with an address that is blacklisted. So they won't share that list. So never make an unconditional offer unless you can write a check for that amount. So
that is golden tip right there. That's a pro tip. Absolutely. Good point, Shaune. One thing too, I was thinking here, and so we got really two large camps of landlords on the group. Of course, the attentional ones, the ones that want to be in the business. But of course, we have a handful of folks that have been forced into, typically when they can't sell or other situations, they've had to rent out the property and to maintain and look after it. If we got people that aren't looking to expand the portfolio, for example, does it make sense for them to, when they go for a refinance, to maybe go for something that where am I trying to go with this? Because we're talking about the requalification. If they're not looking to qualify for any more mortgages, how does that change your approach when you're dealing with the refinance or any of that stuff? I guess at that point, then you just go. You're doing more you're more shopping for a rate than anything else, I would assume.
Generally in that case, and depends on what they want to refinance. They're looking for something maybe a year or two, they're going to sell it. So that would affect what kind of product you might put them into. Maybe just go a short-term fixed, or maybe a 2-year mortgage or something like that, or a variable to help them get through that.
Okay.
So everybody's circumstances are different, right? So you just kind of tell your mortgage broker what your circumstances are, and don't keep any surprises.
Yeah,
that's either. So yeah.
And I think that probably the most important part I want to highlight you brought up there, Shaune, is that exit strategy. So even if you're a landlord and you're not looking to expand the portfolio, knowing how you want to exit the property, or when you can, or how you'd like to do it, that information is critical for you, Shaune, when you're looking at a refinance or looking for a product or for a mortgage to set them up in.
Yeah, no one wants a $20,000 penalty surprise in 3 years when they decide they're going to sell their property because they didn't bother to tell their mortgage broker that was their plan. So
yeah, cool.
And another exit plan, and I know we talked about this before the show or a couple of calls, was about rent to own is another way to get out of your property over time. So I do pre-qualifications on prospective tenant buyers and that. So if you want to do a rent to own, I can participate in that market myself, so we can talk about the trials and tribulations of rent to own or something, how to get out of it. Vendor take back, how that can save you taxes. The other question I get quite often is, how much do I qualify for if I want to buy a rental property? So
that's an
easy question to answer if people are just going to go buy a single family home to live in, right? Because it's pretty simple. How much do you make?
Yeah.
And how much is your mortgage payment? And do you have enough income to cover it? Well, when you get into a rental property, a $400,000 property with $3,000 of rental income is a different animal than a $400,000 property with $2,000 of rental income. You might be able to buy the $3,000 income property. $2,000 doesn't work for you because there's too much of a liability. So I usually do up a little chart for people and say, based on what you make and based on the price of the property, here's how much rent you need to go make this thing work for you. So when you're out shopping around and you see a $400,000 property and my table says, well, you need to have $2,500 in rent to make it work, and the leases are only $2,000, good chance you're not going to be able to buy that property because you can't qualify for it. So it cuts out a lot of the back and forth. So,
yeah, that's helpful. And I think, Shaune, you've brought saying, depending on what you're trying to do, if you're trying to expand the portfolio, there's a lot of factors that need to be looked at to do that, to be able to do it and to continue on qualifying. So if you've got your mortgage broker, you want to ask them these different questions and ask them, well, hey, I want to get the 10 doors or 10 mortgages. How would you order that? Who would you go to for the mortgages? And if you've got a broker that's coming back saying, well, you can only qualify for 5, you might not be getting the best advice for your goals. So that's why I think it's like you've raised some good points, Shaune, why it's so important to have someone like yourself who is more on the mindset on the investing and the landlording side of the business, as you understand the different pieces to put together to make the long-term goal actually happen.
There's some challenges in Alberta. Some lenders have stopped doing mortgages in Alberta that they used to be pretty good, lenders that I'd like to use for. They just said, no, we're not doing rentals in Alberta. And not just Alberta. Alberta, Saskatchewan seems to be the target for most of them. So said, no, we don't care. We're not doing them in there. And they had some pretty good programs. So, and some lenders have cut back from, allowing you 5 or 6 mortgages in Alberta to cut back to 3. So if we set you up for, and they cut back, then it makes it a little more challenging. There's other lenders we have to go to. So
yeah.
You can always find there's always lenders out there you can get a mortgage with. So we've got a lender in our broker channel that doesn't care how many mortgages or how many rentals you have. You can have 100 rentals. You just got to meet the qualifications, and the spreadsheet and everything else has to work for you, right? So rates are a little higher, but the rates they're charging are less than what good A lender rates were 2 years ago. So it's all in perspective. So
yeah.
If someone tells you, we're going to charge you $299 for a mortgage, and 2 years ago, you would have been jumping up and down to get that rate. Now people say, "Oh, geez, how come it's not 199?" So
Yeah, isn't that true? It's all
as long as
relative.
your numbers work, that's what do your math and figure out what works for you.
Cool. Very cool. Well, Shaune, we've done 8:15. We did some overtime over the Hot Soul Lounge. Calgary Flames down here. Kind of hurts right now. But if people want to get a hold of you, Shaune, how can we find you, and what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So my brokerage is Mortgage Line, which is a franchise of mortgage architects. So if you write down my name, it's not very common. So if you just Google Shaune Impey, you'll pull up my webpage or Facebook page or something like that. My webpage has contact information, my email, phone number, stuff like that. So probably the easiest way. You don't have to write down a bunch of emails and phone numbers. So
there you go.
So I'm on, quite a number of different Facebook pages. So search for me there. You'll find me one way or another. So
perfect. Well, Shaune, very much we appreciate your time tonight. Kind of diving into these nuances of getting mortgages, because it is really a chess match out there. So I truly believe, and I'm one for it as well. I'm kind of living proof that you get the right person in your court to get you more mortgages, you can keep expanding that portfolio of rental properties. So Shaune, thank you very much for sharing your time and wisdom tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll see you next week with Robinson.
Yeah, I'm going to tell him right now that he's got a co-guest speaker with him, so now he knows. But hey, maybe he's watching right now. He goes, oh, okay, I already got the message.
Yeah. So
fantastic, right, folks. On that note, we'll end it. And Shaune, thank you very much for your time tonight.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Okay, everyone, have a great night. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.